everybody. Today we are meeting as a Ale Kraków meetup. Ale Kraków is a local, it was local initiative which was focused on sharing lean and agile principles and practices in software development, especially. However, of course, we are open to all groups, all industries, and everybody is welcome to join us as even as an organizer or speaker. Like today, we are hosting Mitya, and very positive way, or a very positive thing of pandemic is that right now we are not local but global, and thanks to that Mitya could join us today. Mitya is from Amsterdam and will share with us his experience in introducing and applying OKRs. Hello Mitya.
Hey. Okay, let's begin. So let me share my screen and let's start. Okay, hopefully by now you can see 2 times my face, one the big one on the screen, one the small one with the video. So my name is Mitya Gladyshev. I'm technical manager at Backbase. Backbase is a fintech company in Amsterdam, which I joined roughly a year ago. And today I will talk about the OKR virus, how to engage one team and then spread the whole virus across the org. I really hope that the result of the meeting today will be not as drastic and dramatic as you can see on the picture, but of course we will break some eggs while trying to cook that monster. So before we begin though, let's just set aside one thing, who will it be useful for. So it will be useful for functional managers or chapter leads or anyone who manages horizontal structures, also for team leaders and agile and OKR coaches. Well, for agile coaches, I expect this will be useful mostly like to improve your health, because laughing is improving your health, and you will laugh a lot listening to my story and my experience. And then the most importantly, this talk is aimed for everyone who could use a bit of OKR in their company, maybe never started doing that, but waiting for something. So today, let's try to make sure that you don't wait any longer. And before we begin, let me just highlight why it makes sense to listen to me in the first place. So what I do, I manage currently 3 Spotify chapters in Amsterdam. That's around 50 reports. I'm also doing fintech consulting for banks, C-level stuff. And last year I opened a development center in Krakow, which I won't promote because it's a not promotional event, but it's nonetheless super awesome. And we have some good people working there. So in everything that I do and everything that you see on the screen, I use OKR as a part of like kind of like manager toolbox. This is why I really love this tool. And to explain to you what happened to me, this kind of a case study that we will be analyzing today together, I need to explain the company setup a bit. So my company, Backbase, which again, like to avoid promoting, I just to be putting these classified things on the slides, is quite big in terms of how many financial institutions it is serving. And what is important for today is to understand the setup that we're working in. So we have an R&D department, which is roughly 800 people, and it builds certain kind of Lego features, like the building blocks from which you can create an experience like the bank application, web or mobile. And then it ships them through the customer success department where I work. And that the department is roughly 200 people globally, to more than like 120 financial institutions in the form of MVPs. And then there is a handover, and of course, banks usually own this kind of software later on. But then you start asking yourself a question: how do 200 people would serve 120 institutions. That's a lot. We need to be hell a lot efficient for that. So to be that efficient, we using something called Spotify model, or rather elements of it. Spotify model version 211. So we have a concept of chapters, and chapter is basically a horizontal team, which includes all backenders, or for example, all frontenders, and people management is concentrated on that area. And for the project, for each particular customer or bank, we form squads, so cross-functional teams. So those cross-functional teams working on this MVP for 3 to 6 months as a Scrum team, and then in the end of the MVP, they are disbanded from the project and return to the pool of resources of the chapter. So as you can see, the biggest, the most fragile point, I would say, in this setup is that the chapter is the only thing that is responsible for ensuring the quality, for improving the process of work, the ways of work, and also for building the tools, right? Because on the project, when you're part of the squad, there is no time to improve anything, right? You do your best using the ways of work which were created in your chapter. So now, final note before I begin the story itself is the specifics of Dutch work culture as I experienced it, because I relocated 1 year ago here in Amsterdam. And if I can call out 3 things, that would be a total work-life balance, which is really respected here. Less authoritarian management compared to, let's say, US or countries like post-Soviet countries like Russia or Ukraine. And then the third thing, which was super important to me, is that the team is a sacred cow. So as a manager, you are responsible for the results of your team. It's unlikely that someone would buy if you just blame, that's the team, I don't have a good team, this is why you don't have the results. So if you just join the company as a manager in this setup, you are very excited on one hand, because to have this work culture, you can also have a lot of freedom and authority that you can give away to the people in your team. But on the other side, it's a bit hard in terms of managing crisis situations. And the crisis situations is exactly what happened. Someone is saying that there is an issue with my microphone. So Bartek, as organizer, can you comment on that? Is there an issue?
Everything is fine.
Okay. Hope it's good for the most of the audience. For the others, I do apologize. So let's continue.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay. So let us begin. So what happened is apocalypse in Amsterdam, which was caused by coronavirus, of course, 1 year ago. So I was flying from Tbilisi to Amsterdam, really hoping to have a nice time, to move from remote work to office work, because I was working remotely for 3 years before that. And then I joined this company with super nice culture and also like Dutch culture. And suddenly a lot of things started breaking up. And 2 things broke up, especially bad in terms of impacting me as a manager. One thing that happened is that the internal work pretty much stopped, right? When you are in crisis, of course, you tend to optimize the resources. And in our case, we really invested heavily into focusing on projects, helping banks to do the digital transformation and to serve customers without offices sooner rather than later, because it was a priority. And of course, there was no time to do any internal work. Anyone who was doing any kind of training, material creation, or anything was reallocated. So as you can imagine, that was not good for the chapter. The chapter was effectively dead. And the second thing that happened is that we all started working remotely. And we didn't know how. And I don't think there were any companies which were not remote first before the crisis, which knew how to work remotely. But nonetheless, it turned out that if you don't have a very good process for everything in your company, once you go remote, you will feel it. So those 2 things happen. And I started analyzing the situation and trying to think what to do, because again, as a manager in this set of culture where you are not a figure of authority, which just tells like, you run there, you sit here, you do that. How do I encourage people to still collaborate and still improve the process and tools? Because short term, of course, we can work on some projects which are at hand, but we still need to invest into the tooling to make sure that long term we can survive. And I had strong feeling that this crisis is for the long term. So the root causes that I identified are three. So first, we don't know how to set common goals as a chapter. Second, there is no system of task tracking and prioritization. And third, the value of internal initiatives in the company is not assessed. So basically, we don't know what we want to do as team, right? We don't know how to track on or put tasks in the backlog. And then we also don't know how to assess the value of what we do so we can promote it and explain why, for example, this initiative is more important than serving this customer, right? Maybe we need to have more staff to work on internal initiatives. So we cannot prove it if we cannot assess the value. So for anyone who is quite experienced with OKRs, it's evident that all three things are falling into bucket of this framework, and I already had some experience with it. So I immediately got very optimistic and I thought, okay, I will be the OKR man. I will go and fix the situation. So I went to the management. I said, okay, we have this super nice instrument that is precisely about setting the common goals. It's about having transparency in the teams, which is really, really essential when we all work remote. We don't see each other. We have to be somehow transparent without over communicating in Slack or Zoom. And then we also need to make data-driven decisions, right? It's hard to just keep all the internal work in place, but we need to at least be able to prioritize and assess what we need to do first. So my request wasn't fully supported, and it's also super understandable, right? What was management tackling back then is the crisis at hand. And short term, of course, we needed to make sure that financially the company can sustain itself. But I got a carte blanche to at least try that approach in one team. And then again, for anyone who is experienced with OKR framework, you will know that you cannot implement OKR from bottom up. You generally combine bottom up and the top down approach. And then you have the company goals and the department goals and then the team goals, maybe personal goals if you go in really detailed, but you cannot start with one team and just grow the goals. You need to align with the rest of the company. But I decided to take this challenge and I built this nice roadmap that you're looking at right now. So I thought, okay, first stage is over. We already thought that we need the OKRs. So now I need to start bottom up. And then I probably need to go kind of like sideways to make sure that more teams are using the framework. And then finally we can do the classic top-down approach and then we have OKR everywhere. Let me dive deep into how I started. Today we will focus more on the elements in yellow, right? So the bottom-up thing and the sideways things, because top-down is something that happens with me right now in the Backbase this year, and I will tell you about it maybe on the next meetup. So how to engage one team, how to start with one team. So most important part is to identify team struggles. Back then, when I joined Backbase, I was assigned QA chapter. So the chapter which consists all the QAs in customer success. And when I started just listening to people and asking them, okay, like, for example, if you had a magic wand, what would be you change, one thing that you would change in the team? I started hearing some unexpected replies, and you should be prepared to do the same. For example, you could think, okay, the team would respond to you, yeah, we want to build a better product, maybe. But one of the most frequent things that I heard from QA chapter that back then, for example, was that, yeah, well, we're not really recognized as professionals in the company. It's really like, nobody thinks about QA. Everyone thinks, okay, we need a team, so we will put front-end engineer, back-end engineer, DevOps engineer, maybe. Yeah, and we need QA. And because of this afterthought kind of mode, the team was really suffering. So I thought, okay, this is one thing that we really need to fix. And I got a range of those. And once you identify the team struggles, you can really show them how the OKR can solve this. Because the benefit of the framework is that you can set any common goal which is shared by the team and reach it. It doesn't matter, it can be kind of sound ridiculous, but nonetheless, if the team wants it, you can get it. So the phase number 2, which you see in yellow, is to brainstorm objectives with the leads. So you would normally either use lead engineers in your team, or maybe a core team that really wants to make a change, which you identify as the most enthusiastic people. Just align with them, have a call, and brainstorm what kind of objectives you would have. You normally would have 3 or 5 of these. I won't go deep down into that because today I won't be explaining the framework itself. But the idea is that, of course, you need to make sure that those objectives are directional, that this is something really within the area of influence and so forth. And then once you have those 3-5 objectives that you are happy about and you believe that the team would really be excited about those, you need to demonstrate them to the team. And normally what you would do, you would explain a bit, like 10 minutes, okay, we have those 10 objectives, oh, sorry, 10 would be super optimistic. We have those 5 objectives at hand. They mean that and that. So how do you feel about them? You can have an open discussion. You can put it to a vote with modern remote work tools like Google Meet or Zoom. You can do that. And then you will immediately know if your team supports the objectives. Because if they don't, you need to just scratch what you did right now and start over. So always make sure that your team supports the objectives if you want to succeed. And then phase 3, the one you see in blue, is to brainstorm some initiatives or concrete tasks that you believe would enable you to reach those objectives. And those should be really assignable, right? Maybe you want to investigate a new technology. Maybe you want to update Android framework stack that you use, for example, use something instead of Espresso for testing. Whenever it is assignable to one person, it is initiative, and you don't really know if the initiative would help you reach the objective. It's something you believe in. So to know whether you reach the objective, you would use something called key result. And now immediately on the slide in big red box, you see that I have this kind of controversial advice. It says postpone key results and then postpone them again. So in ideal situation, if your team is highly educated about OKRs, don't follow this advice, just draft the key results as well. But if you are working in an organization which is just now realizes that there are things to measure and there are certain KPIs and all, and also your team hears from the about OKR system for the first time, just spare them the bureaucracy, because this is what they will perceive if you will talk about everything at the same time. What is important is to get team accustomed to the framework itself, to the habit of working on initiatives to get to the objectives, and then to get those mechanics in place. Once you know the mechanics, then you are ready to introduce the key results. This is not a financial advice in a way that you can fail with that, but this is what I tried with QA chapter. And in a couple of slides, you will know the outcome. Okay, let's go forward. So the outcome of that brainstorm and introduction of the OKRs and QA chapter was this kind of spreadsheet. And this is me starting to talk about the tools a bit. So you don't need any paid tools to start with OKRs. That's the benefit of the framework. You can start as easily as spreadsheet. You just need to be very clear on what you put in there. So what we put, for example, is we thought of what could be the department objectives, right? Remember, we implemented bottom up. We don't know the department objectives, but probably, you know, kind of you from the word of mouth, maybe not formulated to OKR, you kind of understand what department is trying to do. Maybe they're trying to do kind of new approach in project implementations, maybe something else. Just put it there. Then think of the objectives for your chapter or the team, of the key results, initiatives, assign people. What we also did, because we got like 10 or 12 objectives, I don't remember, we got the priority exercise. So on the right part of the screen, you see those columns with value to the company, effort level, visibility. You can create your own measurements of priority. The bottom line is that you need to select up to 5 objectives. Don't overexert yourself, and pick the ones that are most prioritized for the team. So going forward, just fast forward maybe like 3 to 6 months, so, we realized that the spreadsheet is not sustainable way to run the OKRs, and we moved to something like a Jira project, which was basically a custom project created in a Jira that we have. You can also try to use Trello. Also, the free version there has certain limitations, so I suggest either going for professional software or going for custom issue types in Jira. So the benefits that you would get easily seeable on the screen. So you have quick filters by team. You can see objectives of multiple teams. You can see how those collaborate with each other. And it's really easier to track the initiatives and do frequent checkups with your team on how OKR is progressing. And then again, fast forward maybe 1 month after I built this Jira project, I started receiving like requests for help. And I started actually by volunteering to help another chapter, but then like someone from another chapter reached out and said, okay, yes, great, can you also help us? And at first I was a bit puzzled, like when I was seeing your responses on the Bird Cloud, like what made them think that it can be beneficial if I haven't told them about OKRs. Turned out that there is this thing, word of mouth, and people tend to chatter about things. And if you have one team which is suddenly more engaged than other teams, which is suddenly reaching for their goals and getting what they want, everyone else wants to be like that team, right? So this is why, just commenting on what we did there for the first team, your first team, if you implement an OKR bottom up, you need to really make sure that it's a reference implementation, something you're proud of and the team proud of, and everyone wants to be like that. Then you kind of trigger that viral effect that we discussed in the beginning. And then my suggestion is just help people who are reaching out to you. And some practical advices that you can see now in yellow would be that it's useful to create chats for Q&A over OKRs. It's also useful to run a workshop. I will tell you about the workshop in a moment. And then, yeah, it's also important to start collecting the feedback from people you helped, because especially if your organization is quite big, you need some leverage later to, again, like explain others, including management, why it is a success, why people want to use that, and quotes really help. So collect that feedback, don't be shy, show that feedback to the management, and it will help you long-term to also get OKRs top down. So now, word of warning, again, red box, the productivity virus is really highly contagious. Like I mentioned, people will start reaching out to you. So make sure that you set aside some time to help them, that you agree with your manager that you will be helping others to promote OKR culture, or hire OKR coach, also works. But yeah, it's kind of a new trend. So bottom line here is that you need to build the culture of reaching common goals in the organization. It doesn't even matter if it's OKR or you have some other framework in mind. The moment you start helping people to reach their goals, they will start reaching out to you from everywhere for help. So let's imagine people are reaching out to you now for help, and what would you do? Chat is great, you know, kind of personal advice is great, but just to scale it a bit, what I personally suggest is to run the OKR workshop. So this is a screenshot of real life workshop that happened, I think, several months ago in Backbase. I was driving that. We used Miro. Miro is a beautiful tool for workshops. You can also use Bureau, their competitor, but Miro just better. And it's also from Amsterdam. So I support it with all my heart. It's half from Amsterdam, half from Russia. So 2 reasons. So what you would do on this workshop, you basically will explain the basics of OKR. You will help people to set the objectives and initiatives in a kind of virtual scenario. And then you will encourage them to try that in their teams. That will save you like 10 times the time you would normally spend explaining it to every single person. And the good news is that I have a template for that kind of workshop, and I will share it in the end of this meetup, my promise to you. Okay, so coming now to results. So after 1 year of, well, let's say indirectional effort, right? So I was not managing all those 6 or 7 chapters that we have in CS. I was just responsible for 1. This year I'm responsible for 3. So, well, 3 chapters out of 7 are still a bit illiterate. Well, illiterate is a fancy word, right? Let's use not educated about how to use OKRs properly, but they're trying and they're improving. And 3 chapters are quite proficient. So they're using objectives, initiatives, key results, all that together. They are actually on the verge of trying to do kind of cross-team collaboration and shared OKRs. So really proud of them. And overall, the project quality and team engagement really improved. And it is good that we started doing OKRs in times of crisis, because I can kind of retrospect that if we would ignore that opportunity in the company, we wouldn't be in such a state where we are now, when we have a good internal processes, improving our internal tools, and pretty much not burning out that hard as maybe some other companies do. So if I am to sum up all that story, my key takeaways from this one, they're the following. So first, it is dangerous to postpone key results. And so I told you that I will tell you the story and how it went in the chapter that I was managing last year. So we postponed the key results once, twice, thrice, and then it's almost like end of year, and we need to make sense out of our objectives. Have we reached them? Have we not? And since we haven't measured the progress towards those objectives in the beginning, it's very hard to say like whether we progressed or not, right? So always measure this. For example, if you're measuring team engagement and you run in a survey, it doesn't make sense to run it just in the end of the term, right? You need to run it as fast as possible. Realize that your NPS in your team like 2 out of 10, and you need to improve it. Measure in 3 months. Now it's 5 out of 10. Okay, this is your result. You measured it, and you can prove to everyone and to your team as well and to yourself that you achieved that. So don't postpone key results too much. You can do that maybe in the very beginning when the team is still grasping at mechanics. Second takeaway is doing bottom up without top down is hard, like really hard. And the hardest part is that you tend to lose the sense of direction, right? The good part about top down is that if you have company OKRs, or at least department OKRs, you can align your objectives to those to make sure that, okay, for example, we have this big department OKR to cross-train the whole department about a new technology. And then you can have your small objective that would be doing exactly that, the cross-train that technology. And if you don't have that initial input, then maybe the technology you used for cross-training is not something that is relevant for the department. So this is hard to do this, but possible. Insight number 3 is that the 2 most essential things to be successful in OKRs are the OKR check-ins and training. So the training is something I just discussed with you, the workshop, the Q&A chat, maybe personal training that you would do to other managers in your company. But this first part, the check-ins, is something that I haven't mentioned, but nonetheless, it's super important. So the OKR check-in or OKR stand-up is something you do regularly, like maybe once or twice per month. You can do it weekly as well if you have capacity. And you can think of it as a kind of style stand-up. So you share your big Jira board or whatever tool you picked, and you go person by person and looking at the ticket and asking, okay, have you progressed? Do you have any blockers? So all of you probably super proficient in Agile, so you know how to run a stand-up. Just run it for the OKR project, and you will see the impact right away. And then the fourth and very important insight is that engagement is everything. So it's very important to get your team engaged, get them to share the goals that you set. Don't be this kind of lone wolf that just goes, sets whatever objectives, and then pushes the team kind of authoritarian way to reach it. It doesn't work this way. You really need everyone in your team to support that, or maybe like 95% should support the OKRs you picked, and then keep it least bureaucratic as possible. And then to sum it all up, you can also be an OKR man or woman. It's totally possible. And whenever you're just managing one team, or you may be a director of the whole organization, you can introduce it into your company as well. So that's pretty much it. I do have this nice QR code, and if you scan it, it will open a mirror board that you can clone, use resources from, and get inspiration from for your own OKR workshop. If you will have any questions about how that workshop works, just reach out to me in LinkedIn or LinkedIn. This is where I'm most active, and I will try to help you as much as I can. And I guess it's a good moment to do a bit of a Q&A. Right, Bartek?
Yes, even there is a first question on chat. How did you measure engagement?
That's a great question. I'm still doing baby steps at measuring something non-technical like engagement. But what you normally do, you run a pulse check. There are like specified tools, like I think that's the name. That's just like unofficial suggestion. That's one of the tools, but you can start as easy as a Google survey. You can formulate the questions. How do you define engagement? And this is a good one also because everyone defines engagement in their own way. So think of what you see, what you feel, or how would you describe engagement yourself? Come up with a list of 5 questions, create a short Google survey. This will get you started. And you can have like imaginary kind of scale from 0 to 10, depending on the answers of the questions, which will give you an index. So basically, you can start there. You can also use professional tools like Beacon or other, I think the Karma is super cool. I never tried that, but I always wanted. If you use Slack, you can integrate it with Karma and also do this kind of pulse check, instant feedback kind of thing. But you can get started with any free tool. Okay, I see another question from Natalia here. Which plugin do you use for Jira? So no plugins at all, Natalia. That's the beauty of it. You just use plain Jira installation. And if you are a Jira admin or you have Jira admin in your company, he can create a separate project there for you. You need to create special issue types for objective, initiative, and key result. And and then you just put them on a board. This QR code works. I don't know. Let me try it right now with you. Okay. Oh no, QR code no longer works. My apologies. Okay, what I will do, I will quickly find the link to the Miro board. I will post it on the chat, and you will have it before the end of this call. Okay, any other questions, Bartek? Are you monitoring the chat?
Yes, another question is what characteristics company culture is necessary to successfully implement OKRs?
Yeah, a good one. I would say the good part is that any company can implement OKRs, but it doesn't matter what culture they have in the beginning. But if they lack in certain aspects of the culture, they will have to develop them while building the OKRs. So, for example, if the company doesn't have a habit of measuring things, then it will be challenging in the beginning. For example, if you never used KPIs or you don't measure anything apart from whatever financial department is doing, then it will be tricky in the beginning. But overall, like your company should be willing to give authority to people because they will have a lot of authority working on those initiatives and defining objectives on the team level at least. And you should be supporting them and giving them time to work on something internal, which is kind of a chicken and egg problem. that we had in Backbase last year, right? So it's hard to give people time to work on internal stuff unless, as an owner of business, you know that it's beneficial for yourself, because kind of those internal tools would result in projects running smoother. But this is where the bottom-up approach can help you, right? So you can start with one team, prove the business value of OKRs, and then get enough time for internal activities for everyone in your company. I'm being optimistic, of course, it can take time. Okay.
Okay, the next question. To what extent were things tracked and measured at the company before the introduction of OKRs? In my experience, this is a big obstacle to rolling out OKRs, that the organization must be mature enough to have to be even able to measure key results.
Yeah, it's a good one, and it kind of complements the previous question that we had, right? So if you start in the what about
sorry.
Yeah, if you start in bottom up, then you can start with in the organization which doesn't measure anything at all, right? Because you can invent your own ways of measuring things. A good example would be, for example, I'm just repeating myself, sorry. The good example would be backenders and I don't know, unit test coverage, right? So, for example, the company is not into measuring unit test coverage everywhere, but as a backender, you just see those reports, you have access to them, you have access to those numbers. So if you want to improve the unit test coverage, which is usually not something you would do after a certain threshold, then you can measure this even without company, accepting those number-based culture.
Okay, another questions. I would merge two of them. What would you, because they are kind of retrospective, so what would you do differently today? And what learnings did you take from implementing OKRs in your company? And what did the company employees learn about themselves?
Oh, that's a good question. So again, like what I would do, I would start implementing OKRs in terms of key results faster. I was postponing that perhaps too much. I would also try to get more support from the management, which I did, which was basically, to be honest, like one conversation. So instead, I would try to pitch myself maybe to the management of my management, and maybe in other departments, I would also look for some kind of horizontal support. So at least there was a group of managers trying to start it in their teams, right? So maybe you want to do it in your team. If you find another two managers who want to do that in their team, whenever in the organization, then it's easier for you to combine the results of your three teams in a quarter or two and present them and to get it kind of widespread. So those two things, don't postpone key results too much, and find partners in crime, and repeatedly try to align with your management, even if you initially got, well, not a no, but try it yourself kind of response. And by the way, I posted the link to the workshop on Miro in the chat now. Should be accessible. If it's not accessible, just blame me for it. But I think I adjusted the permissions correctly. And again, you can ping me in LinkedIn if something doesn't work or you don't know how to run this workshop. I'm super open to that. Any other questions, Bartek?
Yeah, the link works properly. So thank you for sharing. And another question: how do you measure your OKR progress? Do you have a metric or something like that?
You mean how do I measure the OKR progression through the company, or the OKR since itself?
Here I meant like OKR progress for the whole company, not in the sense like a whole team. I would say that how do you measure that? Which stage are you in?
Like if we refer to the roadmap that I showed
you,
right, with all those stages.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty evident. And remember, I had this slide where I said, okay, After 1 year, we have 6 chapters out of 7 which use OKR. That's a metric number 1. How many chapters use OKR in the first place after the effort? Second metric, how many chapters are using the full framework, including key results and initiatives, doing it quarterly or at least, let's say, half a year cadence. That's the second metric. And then, yeah, the third one is kind of binary, whether you have like a top-down management support or not. Once I have it, I will know it. But you can, the thing about OKR is super flexible. You can invent your own metrics. It's also possible.
Okay, another question. Yeah.
Can I ask an audio question?
Yeah. Also fine.
So thank you, Mitya, for an amazing workshop presentation. So I want just one question to you. So maybe it's broad, but still. So are you now a better company? And then and if yes, then in what way?
Do you know a better company?
Yeah, are you now a better company than you've gone through this?
Yeah. Like
Yes.
as a Backbase.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, since I'm kind of like not silent, but focused on one part of the company, which is customer success, I can only tell about that department, but that department really progressed, and I can see that engineering-wise, they are better. And also we have a better retention rate in terms of how people decide to stay and stick for a longer term, which is super important because you see during the COVID, a lot of people are dropping from the companies. The market is overheated, which is good for us engineers and engineering managers, but not so good for the companies. So to give people extra motivation, you would encourage them to work on something they would love. And this usually includes internal tools, especially for senior people in the company. And also some nice initiatives, running workshops. So doing better, but still a long way in front of us. Okay, Bartek, maybe one more text question and then one more voice question would be fair that way.
Okay. Where do you define the difference between KPIs and key results?
It's kind of like 2 different frameworks. There is OKR framework and there is a KPI framework. They are similar in certain fashion, but KPIs, you don't need OKR to have KPIs, right? It's usually something that you would set for your business rather. For example, we want to increase our revenue by 20% this year. That's a KPI. Doesn't need you to have like any kind of OKR system around it, but it can also be like if you're practicing something more serious like OKRs, maybe your goal is to, like real goal is to have presence in every region in the world, like a kind of like Backbase has. And then one of the key results you would have as an increased presence, increased revenue, whatnot, right? So kind of you see, then with KPIs, the number is the goal. With OKRs, you have a bigger goal, which is supported and measured by numbers. Okay, anyone wants to ask a voice question? Oh, okay,
Yeah,
then
I'll ask one.
Yeah, go ahead, Pascal.
If you encounter any resistance or like, I don't know, anxieties by people like when you wanted to introduce OKRs?
Yeah, it's a good one. So not really, because from the get-go, I was really trying to make sure that it will not be perceived as extra bureaucracy, which I think is the biggest pain point with OKRs. When you go there, like as a classical manager saying, now we will measure everything and the engineers are sleeping after 30 minutes, it's not fun, right? So this is the reason why initially I postponed the key results discussion in the team, because the team was not quite ready. If I was to introduce it in the beginning, maybe I honestly don't know if it was better, because then I would have some resistance. Yeah, and then the anxiety usually comes from not understanding how it works. So when I was, for example, presenting the objectives, those 3 or 5 objectives to the team, first I explained very briefly how the framework works, right? Why objectives are important and what I, as a person, want to solve with those objectives. For example, I have the task to solve those pain points. I want, for example, this team to be more recognized. And if people relate to the objectives you set and to OKRs in general, then you won't see a lot of pressure or resistance. Okay, I see we have one more text question from Natalia. Who conducts check-ins, team leads, or OKR coaches? So if you're lucky enough to have OKR coaches in your company, then good for you. They can run the check-ins, of course, similar to Scrum Masters running their own set of ceremonies. But in most cases, you don't have any OKR coaches, you just have enthusiastic managers. And then they are usually the ones who are doing check-ins. It should be a team leader or a chapter lead or someone who represents a certain portion of authority. Not that he will press this authority down to people, but someone who can facilitate the session. In our case, for example, it's either the chapter lead or the tech lead in the chapter. All right. I'm a bit lost in the comments now. Have I missed any questions?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes,
Sure.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I texted, but there's one more now visible. So I wonder if the teams have separate objectives, or the teams are on the stage that they have objectives for multiple teams, so they share it between more than one team.
Yeah, it's a good one. So with the bottom-up approach, we started with one team, and so there was no shared objectives. And then by now we kind of between 3 and 6, right? 3 are good at OKRs, 3 or more chapters are not that good. And we kind of just last month in March, we started thinking of shared objectives. And it's interestingly, it happened organically. So in the end, when we're through the cycle of setting up objectives in Q1, everyone would say that, hey, we really want to cross-train the team this year. We want to level up our expertise. There is this new set of features coming from R&D, which we don't know how to cook yet in customer success. So we want to learn about them. And it was relevant for all the chapters, and all the chapters opted for this objective. And then it just automatically became a kind of shared objective. But what we want to try this year is to have specific objectives which can only be possible if chapters collaborate. For example, if you want to build an extension of your recruitment process, that can be a web application with the backend, then you need front-end chapter and backend chapter to build that, maybe QA chapter to test that. And then once you have this super nice internal tool which accompanies your recruitment process, you are better at recruitment as a company. So that's a nice challenging kind of cross-department OKR.
Thank you. It sounds like true magic of OKRs in practice.
Yeah. What OKRs are really in practice is a lot of hard work, not kind of like no immediate results. So if I can give one advice, it would be like lots of patience. Just believe in yourself and gradually implement that. And you can see also in this story that I presented, it took 1 year of indirect effort, and we're still not fully using OKRs in the department. I think like by the end of this year, it will be like full implementation, including the department one, and I will be proudly talking about that maybe in a year. But it just takes so much time. People are creating movies or video games in the time span. But nonetheless, it is possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Bartek, okay, monitoring questions. Is there anything interesting coming up?
Yeah.
Since we still have a bit of time.
Yeah, maybe one quick question and then more complex. Quick question is how many people participate in one workshop? Whole team?
That's a good one also, because I forgot to mention that don't run this workshop for too many people. This is the mistake I did. I had, I think, 12 or 15 people on the workshop. It was for 1 hour, and then it was completely impossible to manage all them. And I think the good number would be kind of 6, maybe 8 people max. Just if you want to go through the full cycle of explaining the OKR, setting up the imaginary objective, supporting it with nonetheless imaginary key result, and also a couple of initiatives, like 6 people probably will be top that you can do. If you do it in a Miro, you would have to check their output, and then you would have to fix their output. And sometimes it's really hard to, help people to put the objective into the right place. But you can always start just checking if they have a verb inside of the objective. If objective is a noun, then it's a bad objective. Like we had one of the objectives on one of the teams. I wouldn't name which one, but the objective was forecast. Like forecast what? And then we gradually converted it into kind of improved forecasting by certain amount of points. I wouldn't go too much into the company details on that one, but yeah.
May I ask a voice question here?
Yes, go ahead, Yulia.
Hi, Mitya. It's Yulia from the
Hey.
United States. Our paths crossed some time ago, but
Yeah, indeed.
yeah. So I wanted to ask you, many companies, corporations adopted smart objective settings. It can work or might not work for many companies, but how would you define the key difference between OKRs and smart objectives? Both are specific, measurable, and so on and so forth.
They are quite similar, right, in the way you formulate them. So if you look at the OKRs and into the SMART, right? So for example, in SMART, you have what specific, measurable. Measurable is kind of a key result. Specific is what you normally have in initiatives and an objective as a requirement. Achievable also is an attribute that we put on objective. Relevant, again, this is about aligning OKRs departments, and time bound is something you would have with OKRs as well. So kind of having practiced SMART goals would help you with OKRs as well, but it's a bit of 2 different frameworks. OKRs are about connecting and aligning within your organization long-term, right? So like SMART tells you how to formulate the goal. It doesn't tell you how to align it with other teams, other departments, and kind of there are no rituals about it. It's kind of a good, a very good way to formulate your goals. It's not a framework on its own. But again, like maybe if you build some stuff around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. And a quick one. Do you think that your experience would be different if you ran a team of Asians, Indians, Chinese people who come from completely different culture?
It's a good one as well. First of all, I had the experience of running like teams which are connected through the world and with the kind of a majority of population in the team coming from Asia. It was with my previous employment. And then also in Backbase, we do have people from all over the world, like from Brazil, from Russia, like pretty much, I think like 70 to 80% of the people who we have in chapters right now, they're relocated from somewhere. And they, of course, bring in their own cultural code and cultural differences to the team, which is good from the point of diversity. I don't see big differences in implementing OKR framework, depending on the culture. But of course, you have like those culture which similar to maybe Dutch culture that I described, where there is a lot of individualism going on. There you normally as a person would put your own interests on a certain level, which may be higher than in more like oppressive cultures or traditional cultures. But yeah, if you are a person like that, then what I will tell you is what you would get personally from the OKRs, how it can help you address your pain points. If you come in from the culture which relies on really getting more direction, then you would even ask me question because you would be super happy that finally there is someone saying what we need to build.
Yeah.
But I'm still a learner myself in terms of how to engage different cultures in meaningful dialogue.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mitya. It was nice to see you and to listen. It was cool.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Yulia. Okay. So I see we're a bit over time, but I'm super happy to stay a bit and still talk to you guys and girls and everyone.
Okay,
Bartek, are we out of questions? So we still have something?
We have some,
Thanks,
but maybe it's time to say a huge thank you to you for the presentation. I see this as a very, very valuable, as it was full of practical cases, practical tips. So thanks a lot for sharing your experience. You are welcome, of course, in Ale Kraków. So feel free to join us online or in person in the future. And thank you very much for today meetup. And
thank you, Bartek. Visiting Krakow is always my dream. Like it was my dream the whole year last year, and then kind of hopefully it will be possible maybe soon. Okay, and thanks everyone for being such a good listeners and asking all those relevant questions. I hope it was fun. And again, just find me on LinkedIn if you have any questions about OKRs or you just want to network a bit. Always open to this, and good luck.
Thank you a lot.